AI is going to, we predict, increase competition exponentially. That is country versus country competition, business versus business, and unfortunately, good actors against bad actors.
It's very important that we regard AI systems as, enhancing human capabilities, as us collaborating with them, just as we use tools for everything in many different areas, including computers. And this is AI in many ways is just another tool enhancing and enabling us to do more with less time and fewer resources.
The way that we actually talk to businesses about how they can leverage these models is to combine them with other technologies.
So welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining this webinar with us. Through the next 90 minutes, our intention is to bring together all of the main threads that boards need to understand and drive forward their AI strategy. My name is Neil Sappis. I'm the founding director of Demyst Board Sciences. Demyst is a board performance think tank and consultancy. We help boards develop through board evaluations and other initiatives. Before I introduce the rest of the panel, I would like to mention a new modular program for board directors we're introducing next year in collaboration with other boardroom experts. And we're calling the program Catalyzing Cognitive Diversity in the Boardroom. If you'd like details, please contact me by email after this event. Let me introduce a very highly distinguished expert panel. Absolutely delighted to have this panel together. Each person has been instrumental in developing the content for this webinar, and for that I am very grateful indeed. First, let me introduce Chris Ippolite. Chris is CEO of iSolutions AI. He's, in my book, just a fantastic communicator on AI. His company is spearheading groundbreaking applications in business, and he will have the opportunity to mention some of those as we give examples of what AI is doing. So welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for your involvement. Also, Tony, I'm very, very delighted to introduce Tony, Professor Tony Cohn. Tony is an award-winning researcher, writer, editor, and international speaker. Only recently he's been on somewhat of a global tour, and he's very much in demand, so we're very grateful to have him with us. Those of you who know Demyst will already know Tamara. Tamara is our science director. She's dual qualified as a neuroscientist and psychologist, and she is just a fantastic colleague, and brings so much clear thought and an insight in terms of what we do. Oliver, you might have noticed, has a genetic connection with myself. Oliver is an applied data scientist. He is representing the generation that will be delivering a lot of the systems and thinking and business application for AI over the coming decades. Oliver was instrumental in inspiring me to start Demyst at the moment in terms of the way he thinks, and some of the ideas that he brought to smaller businesses. I very much wanted to bring to large multinational PLCs. You'll note as we go through this webinar that it will become very important for you to build key external relationships in the AI space, both in terms of business advice, but also in terms of research and academia. So please do reach out to panel members using the emails provided. You probably will have noticed that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available online, and we'll provide details with that. So as Tamara has already mentioned, we are giving you the facility to ask questions as we go along. We will try to answer them as we go along, so please use the Q&A facility. First, though, what I would really like to do is start with a couple of polls. So please have your fingers ready on your mice. And the first one is in relation to disruption of your business in terms of AI. So do you expect AI to disrupt your business model? Well, let's complete that. So as you can see, a third of those on the webinar feel that it's probably not going to disrupt your business too much. Half feel that AI is going to be very disruptive to their business. 17% feel that this for them is potentially existential. We want to run another poll. How far has AI been integrated into your long-term strategic thinking? Okay, so we'll end the poll there, and the majority, everybody is very much at the early stages, and a good 2/3 are in the position where actually looking to move forward from a standing start. So let's move forwards. AI is going to, we predict, increase competition exponentially. That is country versus country competition, business versus business, and unfortunately, good actors against bad actors. But it's all now going to be very much about competition and exponential competition. Developing an AI strategy is like having to design your own complex aircraft from scratch with no previous experience whatsoever. Not only that, but you then have to test flight yourself, and you've got to reach and gain altitude before your main competitors do. So the challenge is huge. We therefore want to provide for you what would be key steps and stages. And we hope that starts to become clear as we go through the slides. The really important part of this is that we keep these two areas in mind. This underpins absolutely everything that we're talking about and should be underpinning all of your strategic thinking too. It provides a fundamental safety net for all of us. We're going to be looking at these items. We're also going to be using climbing Mount Everest as a mental picture of how to ascend and progress through the stages of developing AI in our businesses. The timeline will allow us to see where we've come from, where we're going, and to draw out some key terms such as artificial collective intelligence and artificial general intelligence. We want to look at the architecture, what can be done now, what are the implications going forwards as we seek to design and launch our own aircraft. We'll be looking at the human and organizational factors. The collective intelligence stage is going to be providing a seismic shift for all organizations and their structures, and the relationship between people and technology and people and work. And all those things need to go in parallel with technology adoption. Finally, we're going to be looking at a roadmap to be thinking about strategic investment. Where do you start? What skills should you be investing in? And what are your most important assets? So that's the direction of travel. Into the timeline. At this point, I'd really like to introduce Chris and Tony. Perhaps we can start with Tony. And from this, Tony, what would you like to draw out in particular?
So I think the main point to make is that although AI seems to explode into the public consciousness and the media, and every television program, every news broadcast, every front page seems to have something about AI these days. This is actually not that new, really. This has been a sort of long journey, and I've been around long enough to see various AI summers, AI winters, and there's been lots of success along the way, though perhaps nothing quite as much as impinged itself in the public imagination and the public consciousness as we have now. So you can see here in the purple boxes here, various sort of key landmarks, and there's many more, of course, along the way, including some of the advances in gaming, like beating people at Go and chess, but also various other key transfer landmarks along the road to where we are at the moment.
Fantastic. And we've drawn out some of the key future steps here, Tony. We've already mentioned artificial general intelligence and artificial collective intelligence. Starting with collective intelligence, what can you tell us about that, and will that be a staging post for general intelligence?
I think it's something we want to do in any case. Whether it's a staging post is hard to tell. I think it's very important that we regard AI systems as enhancing human capabilities, as us collaborating with them, just as we use tools for everything in many different areas, including computers. And this is AI in many ways is just another tool enhancing and enabling us to do more with less time and fewer resources. So the AI, artificial collective intelligence, is about integrating artificial intelligence with human intelligence to sort of try to get something which is better than either of them individually. And I think also, particularly given, we hear a lot about some of the limitations, at least the current version of AI, and the kinds of hallucinations and misspeaks that large language models are prone to. So having humans in the loop and is particularly important, so that we can have humans moderating the outputs of AI systems. Artificial general intelligence, I believe it's possible in principle. I suspect it's not going to happen in my lifetime. I think it's very challenging. I don't think large language models are the only, it's going to require more than that in order to get there. And one of the things that we might need is certainly so-called neurosymbolic integration that you see on the yellow box there, which is where we combine the advantages of the so-called neuro models, such as these large language models and other kinds of foundation and frontier models, with more traditional AI that's sort of off to the left of this picture, where we have a combination of more symbolic reasoning with these more current and advanced neuro models. But it might require something more than that as well. For example, probabilistic reasoning, explicit probabilistic reasoning, and other things which we haven't invented yet.
So drawing out in particular there that general intelligence can be seen as the peak of Everest. That's the ultimate destination. We don't know what lies beyond that, but it certainly is the peak as far as we see it at the moment. Is that the right way to see it?
That's certainly one way to see it. I think that's not necessarily the only way, but that's certainly one way. And that's, I guess, what AI researchers have been striving for, since the left-hand side of this picture in the 1950s. The early researchers thought we'd be there a lot quicker. The original summer school that happened in Dartmouth College in 1958, I think it was, thought that one summer would solve AI, and we'd be there by the end of one summer. Here we are now, quite a few years later, decades later, and still making progress.
Thank you. And just opening up to the rest of the panel, would anybody else like to add any comments or observations?
I'd add, while you ask 10 luminaries in AI when they think AGI will be achieved, you'll probably get 10 different answers. Here is as far as our panel is concerned, my thoughts are consistent with Tony as well, that we're not quite there. I mean, you've heard people in the headlines talk about this in just the last handful of days, talking about anywhere from a few to 5 years. And, Tony mentioned probably not in our lifetime. I'd have to agree. I think specifically when you're looking at what we are defining as today's AI, it's a very specific type of technology, so to speak, or training technologies. You notice in that lavender box where we're talking about transformers, that's specifically the methodology that's used to create the models that we're familiar with today. Probably the biggest landmark moment that occurred that really thrust AI into the zeitgeist as we know it today was just about a year ago, was when we started hearing about ChatGPT. Now, this is arguably you could call it a front end for kind of a consumer type version of interacting with AI, but it did introduce more people to the concept and discussion of AI than ever before in the history. As a matter of fact, if you look at the ChatGPT as an application, it reached 100 million users faster than any application ever had. As a matter of fact, the previous record holder for that was Instagram, that took like 9 months to get to 100 million users. It took 30 days for ChatGPT to be able to get to 100 million users. So that just means it became immediate, it caught fire. And what that really is an interface to GPT models. There's a ton of different models now, but if you look at the ones that are behind ChatGPT, just because that's what most people are familiar with, that the T there stands for transformer. And transformer, the application of the training using this particular approach really came about as recently as 2017, when Google Brain released their "Attention is All You Need" paper outlining this transformer approach. So when you look at AGI, when you're looking at the top of the summit, I don't believe that there's anything recent that makes AGI seem any more sustainable than maybe it was prior to this, but certainly a step a very important step in the right direction towards some of the technologies that might be necessary there. Tony did a great job of framing up what some of the requirements would be, but the message I'd like to just share, and we'll continue to talk about this moving forward, is that there's no reason to be waiting for your AI strategy. There's very capable models, specifically the ones we just described that are available today, and we can talk about that as we go along. So there's really no reason to be sitting on your hands as far as AI strategy is concerned, just because we have not achieved AGI.
Ever since the year dot, that if you take a specific enough problem, then we've been able to generate, a good AI system to solve that, or at least provide useful inputs to humans. It's the general which is the hard. So if you've got a particular problem, then and if you've got a particular problem you're coming to solve, probably we can build an AI solution for that. It's an AI system which can solve all the problems that's challenging.
We've had one question, which is, thank you very much, Samantha. What about collaboration rather than competition? And I'll say, from my perspective, that if we look at it in terms of country to country and business to business, I suspect that there will be a lot of competitive drivers, even during the AI Safety Summit, which is actually held not far from where I live. The UK announced a significant program to drive this forward. And then 5 minutes later, the US announced a parallel program in competition. So it's one perspective that I have. But in terms of collaboration, yes, absolutely, it does provide lots of collaboration opportunities. Roles such as Tony's and Chris's and maybe some of ours in some respects can help facilitate more collaborative relationships. But thank you very much for that, Samantha. So I'm going to just hand over to Chris now to walk us through the next two slides.
Yeah, and really to kind of continue on from the point I was making earlier about, what do we have at our disposal today? And I think it's really important for businesses to really evaluate what is possible when they're thinking about what their strategies are. So I mentioned earlier the interfaces to models that almost everyone in the world has access to in some way, shape, or form through the form of ChatGPT that I mentioned, or even Bard. These are becoming free, easily accessible tools. And unfortunately, as I've been having discussions with businesses, even in the last year or so, since those technologies have become, again, part of the general discussion, I've noticed that where the focus, first of all, there's an assignment of that's what AI is. So AI, first of all, doesn't have to be conversational. ChatGPT and Bard make it conversational. It absolutely doesn't need to be just a question answer machine. So what I find when I talk to business decision makers is that generally there's a lot of focus on what cannot be done within those paradigms rather than what can be done. So for example, if your expectation would be that you can ask through a conversational AI interface, like the ones mentioned here, whether or not information about your business, like what products in our line may be in high demand in the coming year. If your expectation is that the model is going to know that information, it won't. Certainly, that's proprietary information that was not part of the corpus of data that was used to train it. In some cases, there may be information about your business that's online somewhere that could have been, scraped as part of the web crawl for that data. But really, I think the best way to look at what the capabilities of AI are currently are not to focus on information extraction from these models. They are not intended to be databases. They certainly, you can ask it questions and get a lot of information and use it as an alternative to Googling something. But from a business standpoint, that really shouldn't be how you're evaluating the strategy. And instead, if you see on the next slide, the way that we actually talk to businesses about how they can leverage these models is to combine them with other technologies. So for example, I won't go into every step of what you're seeing here, but this is really an example of the type of implementations that we're building for businesses today. And you can see that the models themselves, which I refer to as foundation models here, just to draw a distinction from being like Gen AI, they can actually perform different tasks. So you'll notice here we asked the same question: what products in our line may be in high demand in the coming year? We can have agents, which are a different technique that we use to actually have that interface with not only the foundation models, but also to interface with data sources that are available to your business. So you can absolutely have a connection between important proprietary documents, your database systems, any kind of other APIs, or just the general knowledge of your organization. You can tap into that for the answers to control the truth, rather than you having to get truth out of, let's say, the language model itself. So when I ask a question about, what something about my products, I can actually point that to the databases that control my product inventory. In that case, then the foundation models can play a role of orchestration or routing, where they can make some observations and potentially even send those observations off to other models that can then orchestrate this whole process. And you see down on the bottom line, one of the observations, can certainly be something that was determined as it was evaluating the question, but then it can hand it off to other technologies. Like we use a lot of Python, which is just a coding language and provides execution environment for us to do things like create insights and do some of the math and come up with some of the visualizations. So these are all technologies that have been around for a long time that are used within business. And instead of having the language model do all of this, we're really minimizing the role of the language model to be a source of truth, and using the organization's truth in orchestration with a language model to be able to provide a little bit of reasoning and some of the logic that's necessary to come to some of these conclusions. And there are multiple different models available. Some of them are even trained just on code, which are a little bit better at logic. You can actually pick the right models for the right job and come up with a very sophisticated approach using these as tools within an entire ecosystem that leverages modern day AI. And this is what businesses are doing today. So there's really no reason to wait for things like AGI or even some additional improvements to be able to start to think about your own corporate strategy leveraging AI.
Fantastic, thank you. So just to clarify, large language models like ChatGPT provide an excellent interface to ask plain English questions of a system, which then goes out and orchestrates the integrations. And once the answer starts to come back, it then interprets it for the end user in a language they can understand. So that's broadly what's happening in the sausage machine. Is that the right way to see it?
Yeah, I think that's well put. You're not relying on it to be able to speak to users and interact with users in a way that makes sense to them because of its knowledge of language, but not necessarily from an informational standpoint. I think you put it quite well there, Neil.
But another takeaway there for me is that ChatGPT is not a reasoning engine. Well, there's an argument that it might be about on the cusp of being better at reasoning, but it is synthetic. It synthesizes reasoning, so it looks like it's reasoning, but it isn't really. But the kind of reasoning that we need with collective and general intelligence has that reasoning. Is that right?
Yeah, I think Tony brought up symbolic models that has they're a little bit less, though they're considerably less black box. So you can actually point to specific capabilities that it has and actually integrate it within your systems a little bit easier. Those are the types of things that you would need to really do that higher level of reasoning. But the level of reasoning that can be achieved even with some of the models and orchestrated models that we have right now is certainly capable to be able to bring what humans are currently doing within organizations to scale. So I think that's probably the most important part, is just thinking about today, how can we embellish the productivity and efficiencies that we're gaining with humans? How can we embellish that with these models? Because they don't need to be able to be fully autonomous to be able to play a role in that equation.
Samantha's asked a great question, and it kind of dovetails with something I wanted to draw out in relation to foundation models. A little bit later on, we're going to have a slide where it talks about at what point do companies step on to the AI ladder, the choice of foundation model or not, or at what stage the foundation model has reached before you take it on. Her question is, if everyone is able to get the same answer, the assumption being that AI will come to the same answer, how do organizations differentiate? That's got something to do with how foundation models are trained, hasn't it, Chris?
It absolutely does. I think it's philosophically very fascinating as well, too. If you really think about this as, let's say everyone in the world has access to the same answers, we are democratizing that level of intelligence and knowledge. So then what makes everybody different? Well, I think the answer within the context of business is even more profound than if we just look at it from an individual standpoint. And that is that difference is all of your proprietary information. The information that makes your organization special, that kind of creates that digital fingerprint and creates all the opportunities and advantages for you within your market, are not part of that democratized knowledge that everybody has access to. So it has never been more important to focus on what data differentiates you within your marketplace and see that as an advantageous driver towards growth and productivity and efficiency and being able to expand within your markets. So really very much is about that baseline, creating that opportunity to bring in proprietary data as a driver.
And also, isn't it true that one of the terms we're going to be talking about shortly is curation? That as AI develops, all of us are going to become curators of AI to one degree or another. Doesn't that involve to some extent transferring how we think and what we think, and almost putting a human imprint onto the AI in terms of how it's trained? Is that the right way to see it?
Yeah, no question about it. I think tomorrow you probably have some interesting thoughts on how human, when the curation component of it and how humans interact. But in short, before I pass over to Tamara for her thoughts there, I'll just tell you that to me, the present day version of this is how we can embellish the capabilities of humans that are in these processes. So that really is the 2023, 2024 look at how you can create advantages there.
Thank you, Chris. So let's open it up to the rest of the panel. Tamara, Tony, Oliver, would you like to add anything there?
Yeah, that's a really important point that everyone's making. I think the next stage of kind of what we've been doing currently in a lot of data teams is kind of how do we make what we observe in the real world useful and encode that in data. But the most interesting thing is what we've been mentioning, which is kind of how do we then encode the heuristics, the feelings and intuitions and philosophies of an organization to essentially kind of help a hypothetical AI assistant for whether it's for a team or for a board, to actually kind of whittle down those opportunities into recommendations that are actually useful or likely to be accepted. If you imagine like thousands of potential permutations that some sort of AI assistant can create for a team, but having that encoded heuristic that the organization uses, their character, can start to whittle those down to something more useful.
Thank you. And
thanks, Tamara.
Thank you.
Yeah, I made a note there about, how do you feed the sort of human culture of the organization into the foundation model, so that you can get that flavor of it as well. And maybe part of that is around issues of alignment. So not just kind of alignment with human values, which we hope will be there, but also alignment with organization specific values as well.
Thank you, Tamara. Would Chris or Tony have something to add to that?
I would just share anecdotally that one of the things that we do when we're building out these systems is we spend a ton of time identifying who the users are, like the actual individuals that are going to interact with the system. We've used the term persona in various different ways, but in the AI integration space, we use the term persona to define who the user is, what their goals are, what they're trying to achieve, how data is important to them. And one of the interesting byproducts that have come out of that is that we found that we can actually model what the interactions are that the users have with their proprietary data. And what comes out of that after the long term is that we actually see, skills that users have and capabilities that users have and insights that they're be able to have that they're organically bringing to the table that may not have been easy to see from their managers or their reports in the past. So it's really kind of given a whole nother organizational management clarity to be when we're actually identifying who the actual users are and how they're integrating with these systems and being able to model that learning right back into it. So I'm very hopeful for humans to have even a brighter light shown on them as a result of some of these technology integrations.
And later on, we are going to be talking about the organizational and the talent and human personal side of this in terms of how roles will evolve. So there's a question further, is there a danger of us losing thinking skills? Well, hopefully we'll start to address that, but let's keep that particular question in mind as we move through.